under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, our first agenda item is, we asked the Lombardo Associates to come. P.L. Lombardo is here with us today to go over the next steps in our sewer project. As Joe outlined last week for us, we've, after looking at any available sites, any possible sites, we decided that the next best location would be 16 Manwaring Road. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I asked the different committee heads or different committee members to come to ask questions, any concerns they have. So as we move forward with this, we're not seeing the design today. We haven't approved it yet. We'll do that Friday. But just so, Joe and Pio have an idea of any concerns we have for this particular location. So Joe, I don't know if you want to give a little intro before Pio.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having us back here. Joining us remotely is Pio Lombardo from Lombardo Associates. As Jerry had mentioned, we gave a briefing 1 week ago at the previous town board work session where we identified 16 Manwaring Road as a viable alternative site for the placement of the wastewater treatment system for the municipal buildings. The purpose of today's visit and follow-up is to allow the town board and associated committees an opportunity to ask any follow-up questions, either to myself or to Pio Lombardo, and ultimately to get feedback from the town board and potentially a go-ahead on advancing the design task for this project.
Okay. So Pio, maybe if you can just give us the scenario, how we got to where we are today, and then what the next step is.
Well, we've been at the project for, I think it's close to a year now. The first step in the process was for us to determine the degree to which the municipal properties in the town center, including the school, could solve their wastewater issues with individual systems. And we've produced a report that showed that the main challenge in the town center is the lack of separation between the existing water supply wells for those properties and the various septic systems. That when one takes into account all those separation requirements, that there's very little room. There was only 2 sites that we identified where a system that serves the center could actually even fit. And we recommended to move out of that area because that area is what we call the top of the watersheds. And any wastewater that gets discharged in that location would be within the island's aquifer for the longest time, over 50 years, such that given concerns about what's in wastewater, and obviously the groundwater is the island's sole source aquifer, we thought it was, we feel it's advisable to discharge the effluent in a different location that had shorter residence time or travel time, basically to the ocean, to the bay, mainly to protect the island's water supply. Previously, we had examined only town-owned properties, and this parcel, as the board knows better than I, was sort of targeted for some affordable housing construction, but my understanding is that they ran into the wastewater challenge, if you will. They couldn't solve that. We had recommended the airfield location because of environmental attributes predominantly. And we respect and appreciate the community's reaction to that and preference for it not to be the location. So we've looked at man wearing. We still have some, let me call it technical issues that resolve that Joe and I have spoken about, and we don't think anything is insurmountable at that site. The site is attractive in the sense that land use adjacent to it is not solely residential. And groundwater flow path is towards Gardner's Bay. I think it's called Gardner's Creek there. And there's very little residential development down gradient of the site. So from that perspective, from those perspectives, in our professional opinion, it's an attractive location. And naturally, from a cost perspective, as compared to the airfield, it's going to be less expensive because we're not running as much pipe. And it is, from my experience, it's a nice location in terms of serving the town's municipal buildings and positioning the town for future, provides the town with flexibility for the future. How it gets integrated with what the town does, that's a total separate matter. But at least you're not, the challenge with the two sites that we identified right in the center was that they had space constraints. There wasn't much more that could be done at those sites besides serving the immediate municipal facilities.
Right. And Pio, I just want to remind everyone that the reason we didn't include Man-Waring Road in the master list for you to look at was because we had targeted it for housing. But after much discussion and soul searching, we felt that to address our housing needs first, we have to address our water needs.
Right, and as well as my understand, Supervisor, is that that site was constrained for housing because of that proposed housing density because of its size and it wasn't going to be able to be compliant with wastewater regulations. Whereas from a municipal perspective, we have reached out to DEC on a very preliminary basis. DEC is the permitting agency for this project, not the county health department. County health department provides comments and advice, but all municipal entities are governed by DEC.
Okay. And Joe, could you just, in layman's terms, talk about the flow, where it's going direction-wise?
Sure, but as a matter of fact, Pio has prepared an image that might be helpful for answering those questions.
Can I share the screen?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, when spoke to Joe about this morning, so I prepared this aerial photo that illustrates, I hope you all can see that.
Pio, can you zoom in on it, please?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, there you go. Is that better?
Thank you.
You're welcome. So what you'll see here, these black lines, thin black lines, are groundwater contour lines. And you'll see the multiple ones here that are close. Basically to the right of that, it flows to the right, which is to the east. And to the left of that, water flows to the left or to the west. So, and water flows perpendicular to these lines. So I drew in these arrows that basically show what the direction of groundwater flow from the Man-Waring site. And it'll generally be in that direction. And as you can see, there's little to any development between the Man-Waring site and Gardner's Creek.
And when we talked about the flow rate, why we needed to get it away from the center because it would sit there the longest, what's the projection here for the time frame?
Well, good question, Supervisor. I don't have it exactly, but As I recall, these are going to be, this is probably going to be in the 25-year range is my best estimate. I'll look at the maps in that regard. But typically the first line here is 2 to 5 years, and the second line is usually 5 to 10. So we're in the 10 to 25 year interval, as I recall. So we're in that, again, we're in that interval. And then, you know, very importantly, there's little development between the site and the surface water, Gardner's Creek, so that, you know, it would not interfere with any prospective use, groundwater use for water supply. That's our fundamental concern associated with siting facilities, is going to interfere with the water supply of the community, whether it's individuals or, you know, groups of folks.
So Pio, initially you told us that, you know, the airfield was the best site, you know, best, good, better, best. And other than the potential separation with, you know, setbacks here, how would you rate this one compared to that one?
I would call this one very good. You know, the bigger advantage at the airfield is that it's huge, and that it's pretty open. So that site development costs here are going to be higher because obviously we've got to take trees down. Whereas in the airfield, we identified the location to be, you know, it was in an open area. So site development costs were going to be lower there. And there was more elbow room. Here, there's the capacity of the site we haven't determined, but it's obviously going to be lower than, significantly lower than it would have been if it was at the airfield.
Okay.
But
Anybody have any
you know,
questions?
in terms of dealing with the immediate issue of the town's municipal buildings, this is an attractive site.
Is it a timeline? Is there a timeline developed, Pio or Joe?
Well, what we would anticipate is, Joe, if you don't mind my interjecting, is what we would anticipate once we get a clearance from the board to focus on this site, but we would basically complete our due diligence to make sure there's no problems with the site, and that could be done very quickly. I would expect within a week or two. And then the next step is to resume the actual, well, there's two major items. One of them is the filing of the engineering report with DEC to make an application for a speedies permit. That requires that the town board issue a letter basically supporting the engineering plan that would be submitted. And then the second item would be the actual production of the plans and specifications or the construction documents, you know, for the project. Realistically, those would take that would probably bring us through the end of the year to get those completed and then to get them reviewed and permitted by DEC. So we would hope that that the project could go out to bid or would be available to go out to bid next year. I'm going to say next spring. And obviously funding is obviously a critical issue with that. But in terms of production, the project should be able to be available for requesting bids by next spring. Naturally, we'll be working with Joe and others in the town regarding grant applications for the actual construction.
Joe, how does that square with the school's timeline?
That's very much in line with the schedule we had discussed initially with the school. Obviously, there's some variation of variables to the functionality of their system. You know, they're susceptible to potential failure at an unpredictable time, but generally this 2023 out for bid schedule was acceptable to the school.
Theo, could you? Oh, got it.
Okay, any other questions from the board?
Revised estimate?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we'll get into that. Before we go to the audience, I asked the committee members to come in. Let's start with them. If anybody on any of the committees have any questions for us. John Kerr, you're on the Comprehensive Plan Committee. You want to ask your question?
Yes, I'm concerned about the soil ability to absorb the amount of water that is going to be coming from this plant. I understand we're possibly producing 3,000 to 6,000 gallons a day. What's the ability of the soil in that area to take that water away and then on this 25-year cycle? And that's a lot of extra water on a daily basis as opposed to current precipitation levels. Just curious about if your due diligence is going to include soil testing for permeability.
We are not, we're frankly not concerned about the soil's ability to accept the water. On the one hand, yes, there will be soil testing to confirm what they are at that location of wherever the proposed drain fields or leaching pools are located, just to make sure that, for instance, there's no clay there. However, obviously, Shelter Island is blessed with a lot of sand, and the sand is highly permeable. So, you know, as a matter of fact, design criteria that the county uses and the state endorses, basically, if a soil scientist designates the soils as either a category of SP or SW, you automatically design it based upon the highest rates. So, so again, the Shelter Island is blessed that you have a lot of sand, as Long Island or the southern portion of Long Island. We would only be concerned if there was rock or whether if there was clay in the soils. And that's generally not the case. And
Andrew?
and then the
I'm
last
sorry.
item, the loading rates that we're talking about are relatively modest. They're pretty
6,000 gallons a day is modest. We have rainfall that isn't anything like that in one centralized area. And that's a smaller, is it going to be like an outflow pipe coming out of your system that it goes into the soil? I'm not quite sure how you introduce the effluent into the groundwater. How do you do that?
Well, there's two techniques that are used. One of them is what we call a drain field, where it's basically spread over the ground and through piping network. And the loading application rate is set by code. And you're looking at, I can't remember the exact number, but we're looking at less than 2 inches of water per day going through sand. So that's not an issue. And then leaching pools are similar, but it goes out the sides. But in terms of volumetric water being added per square foot, we're really talking about very small amounts. You can, and again, we're using code numbers. We're not making anything up or doing anything that is not scientifically established and required to be within code. So we're not making any judgments on the ability of the soils. We're using well-established criteria. Andrew, you had a question?
Yeah, relative to the other sites that you considered, are there any constraints associated with this site that might influence us in the future? For example, additional volumes, different kinds of effluent, different contaminants to get out, and so forth. It's because the cost is a little bit less, but it's still a lot. And so we want to, I think, as a town, give ourselves as many options with regard to the future use of the system as we can. And so I'm interested in what constraints there might be.
Well, there's going to be the constraints that we're going to be dealing with are, first of all, the constraints in that area in terms of water supply wells that are going to be nearby, and obviously we need to maintain minimum separation distances from those. Now, the site is only so large, and so we're only going to be able to put in a facility that can handle so many gallons per day. So that is a constraint that will be associated with any property. In terms of treatment techniques, we will have the flexibility, and it's to be determined yet, let me call it add-on treatment processes that would be included besides just dealing with nitrogen. And we've mentioned this with the board, I believe last time, is that we could use advanced oxidation processes that deal with what's called the contaminants of emerging concern, and pharmaceuticals, et cetera. So that's easy to add. In fact, it's to be finalized, but we've had discussions about including those treatment processes as part of the treatment unit. So
let me make sure I understand. You could add more treatment components at the site, but if you wanted to add a lot more volume, it sounds like you'd have to find another place to put it. Is that right?
Let me say yes, but what additional volume is one talking about? Now, there's going to be a maximum that can be added. Okay. Now, if you're thinking about adding more than that, that's obviously going to be an issue.
But if you did that, you could probably treat it at that site. You just have to find another place to put the volume.
Well, exactly. I'm glad you mentioned that, because if one then uses the site solely for treatment and puts the disposal in another location or reuse in another location, all of a sudden land has been become available for use. So,
okay.
And that would be the ideal, situation. And then, and I'm sure you're familiar with that issue has been explored by the town.
Okay, thanks.
My pleasure. Yeah. Lisa,
Lisa?
you're gonna need to open. Oh, there you go.
I have a question. Since this is a more condensed area than the initial site, is there going to be any impact to the neighbors, since you have houses that are much closer to this proposed site? I mean, I'm talking about any noise, any impact whatsoever that neighbors need to be aware of.
No, I mean, first of all, we do pay very close attention to noise and odor. There are any noise generating equipment is really going to be, most of the noise generating equipment with pumps are all below water, so you can't tell that they're even there. There's going to be a fan on the site, but that'll be enclosed in a sound attenuating enclosure. And then there'll be some electrical equipment inside a small building, but you'll never be able to, you can't hear it outside of the building. I mean, and the only noise inside the building is going to be the noise associated with electric panels, a small hum. But other than that, there's nothing else that one can hear. In terms of odor, the system will come with what we call an active odor purification system in which the foul gases are sort of extracted. The tanks are under a vacuum. The air is extracted and pushed through a filter so that there's no odor that's observable. And the best example, frankly, is to take a look at if somebody really wants to gather their own data, is to drive by the sites that we've engineered that exist in Hampton Bays, as well as Captree State Park and Connecticut State Park, that are of comparable size. And we've engineered these systems in shopping centers with very high-end restaurants and retail shops nearby or adjacent to them. We've not experienced odor. We haven't experienced odor problems. Now, odor does exist. We just proactively deal with it.
Okay.
And Pio, to follow up on Lisa's question, the obvious is, should the neighbors be nervous about their wells?
We will finalize an answer to that very shortly, Supervisor, in particular, because we need to identify where they are, those wells exactly are. We haven't been able to gather that information yet. And then we would show where the discharge would be from the site so that we can certify that the discharge is down gradient of the wells and outside their zone of influence. That's the way that we scientifically answer that question. Now, our initial reading of that area of the two adjacent properties is our preliminary assessment has been that their wells are in the back of their property. Okay, when we've looked from the street, we have not seen any wells there. So, and so our initial concept is the drain or the leaching pools or drain fields would be towards the front of the property for the treatment plant site. But frankly, I'm glad you asked that, Supervisor, because that's the first thing that we're going to confirm, once we get, direction from the board to, let me call it, run this site to ground.
Okay, just to recap, Pio, then it's safe to say that there will be no environmental impact on the neighborhood or the neighbors to quell any concerns.
Right. I want to be very open and honest and comprehensive. Obviously, there's trees there now, and it's a forested parcel. That's going to change. Okay. We like to say that the net effect of the project is to have a positive impact on the environment from all of the things that are being done. We strive very strongly to be a good neighbor. We don't really want to know, we don't want people to know that we're there. We do that by obviously noise and odor are the obvious ones, but we pay attention to the aesthetics of the buildings as well as to landscaping. So it's very important that, I like to say that we don't want anybody to know that we're there, because if they do, they're not going to be happy. That's generally what happens at wastewater plants. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else on the committees?
Yeah, if I may suggest also, Lisa, any layouts of the parcel, would be, any proposed plans, and we would go through a very open process with the town to illustrate what's being proposed, and we very much welcome feedback about, because there's always a lot of different ways to do things.
Howard Johansson from the
Yes.
Conservation Advisory Council.
I just have a question on do we still require a pumping station, and where would it be located?
we still are talking about a pumping station. It would, it's required. It would, the location that was proposed as at the library.
Thank you.
That's because that's the lowest spot in the whole
That's
project.
correct. That's correct.
Anybody else? Okay, did you have something you want to ask Joe?
Yeah, Joe, couple of things. Number one, when the engineering piece moves forward with this piece of property, should it move forward with this piece of property? The two questions that sits in the back of the town board's mind, obviously, is the possible future expansion of the treatment plant to include other contaminants. So obviously, we'll know probably better as that engineering effort goes forward, to what degree that would be able to assist in the future of, other than nitrogen, looking at other possible contaminants. And number two is the potential for community housing. Should community housing come somewhere in this area, with the potential for that as well. Joe Fenora, our town engineer, developed a list of positives about this particular piece of property. There were key points about, why this property finished high on the list. Joe, could you just quickly kind of just review some of those pluses of why Manwaring is a desirable location?
Sure. And we don't want to spend too much time rehashing issues that were already touched
Already
on.
mentioned, yes.
But generally speaking, this site meets all of our basic needs for the system. Its location is downhill, down gradient from the users, as well as having very limited down gradient or downstream groundwater users. The site is located with relatively close proximity to the users, minimizing cost and the need for additional infrastructure. And perhaps more importantly, or most importantly, is that this site is available to meet the schedule of the school's needs for a new wastewater system. And very few, if any, other parcels are available to meet that accelerated schedule. So we reviewed many sites, and several fit the technical criteria, but none except this would fit the criteria for the accelerated timeline of the project. So this one, I guess meets the cliche of checks all boxes.
So I just wanted to make sure that everybody heard that, because that influenced the town board in terms of looking at this project seriously, this site seriously, that it did check all those boxes, and that there is time element involved here with the school. And, we're determined to get this project done. No matter where you locate the treatment, on this island, you're going to get a little bit of pushback. Obviously, when we talked about the airport, Clinic Wickers Airport, we got a tremendous pushback from that. We listened, and we changed course. It's not a board that it's still the best site. It's still the site of choice. However, with the amount of concerns from the public, and it wasn't just the volume of pushback, it was the substance involved in those remarks as well. This is a piece of property that, it's not like we have 30, 40 pieces of property to choose from. This is a property that we had to sacrifice on one hand to do something that all the town board is determined to do, and that is to lower nitrogen levels dramatically in the center of this town. And this is the best way that we can do this in terms of water quality. So if you want to talk about water quality, you have to have solutions. This is a solution to a major water quality issue confronting this town for decades. And we're prepared to follow through on it. So, it's just, again, I think we need some support from the public moving forward. Everybody realizes that water is the number one issue, and water quality is the number one issue. We have a school located here. We have a tremendous amount of our year-round population located here. It's just advantageous to move forward. There's no time like the present. It's the water quality is not getting better. It's only getting worse. We have to do something to reverse that trend. Thanks.
Anybody else? John?
Thank you. I'm just concerned about this idea of adding other modules in order to take out more contaminants. I know this is a preliminary discussion and we don't know about the financing of such a thing. But as we add a different module for each of these different possibilities to, let's say we wanted to make this what we call gray water leaving the plant, which would be drinkability, it would be not drinkability. If you want to make a tertiary level plant, is that something that we can talk about? Is that a proper term? How do we get to a tertiary level cleanup when that water leaves? Is that something that you can do with your system?
Yes, one should, the technical description of the treatment technology is tertiary treatment. Tertiary treatment fundamentally refers to nutrient removal, whether it's nitrogen and or phosphorus. So there is significant nitrogen removal that's proposed to be achieved here, well over 94%. Now, the item that we tangentially, I guess, have been discussing is dealing with the emerging contaminants. And I'll just venture often that we're going to be recommending, and it doesn't frankly cost that much, is that a treatment system be installed associated with nitrogen removal that would deal with those emerging contaminants. And the choice that we have to come to a decision on is whether it's solely ozone or whether it's using UV light along with hydrogen peroxide. Either of those systems are not going to break the bank in terms of cost, and they're known to be effective. So
would those costs be the additional piping you were originally planning to go to Clinicus Field? Would that additional cost for those modules come out of that money, or would it be in addition to that? So I think you talked about a $3 million plus project design idea. Is this going to be less than, more than?
Yeah, it'll be less than that number. Yeah, because first of all, we're reducing costs by lower pipe length, and the cost of the treatment modules for the system, I mean, for this size, which is, it's not big, it's not small, it's sort of moderate, low to moderate size. The cost for the equipment and even its operations is not that great. Frankly, it's not, quote, it's in the noise of the numbers. It's within the budget estimating accuracy.
Okay.
And one of the feedbacks, John, one of the feedbacks we're getting from our grants writer, from Jennifer Marciano, our part-time grants writer, is the time is right now to get these projects shovel ready. And that one of the projects, this municipal wastewater treatment plant, is high on the list. And she feels that she's confident that we can seek some major funding for this particular project. So obviously, every community is thinking along the same lines. The sooner we can get this project up and shovel ready and apply for a grant, the better off we'll be.
I have a further question. The ozone treatment and the UV treatment, would that reduce viruses and bacteria then?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they absolutely deal with disinfection. They're strong oxidants, so they do the job of disinfection, no question about it. The real objective, though, is for breaking down these contaminants into benign materials. Frankly, just putting the water in the ground serves as a disinfectant. Rule of thumb in the industry is that 4 feet of modestly perking soils removes viruses and fecal coliform. So,
John, I just want to add, when Joe and I met with the school was ready to move forward with their project. They had the engineer that designed it, but it was strictly for nitrates. And we felt, when Joe and I met with them and we discussed it, we felt, let's look at the big picture and not just, take care of one thing and not have any opportunity to address the other issues. So that's, and the school is the biggest participant in this project. And the other point was that it's all taxpayer money, whether it comes from the school or from the town. So if we're going to do this, let's do it once and do it right. So the ability to expand the system for other filtration was crucial to the town board and ultimately to the school.
Yeah, and one issue that we, it's rearing its head is the PFOAs, compounds in water supplies. And we're seeing this, frankly, we work on Martha's Vineyard, same problem there. And there's concerns about, so we felt it was prudent for the town and your water supply that these, let me call it high levels of treatment be part of the system.
I just have a question because about going forward to this. No, we don't seem to have a lot of pushback about this plan as it is now. But you have to understand the community and the neighbors are concerned about what is the eventual impact on their neighborhood, like Lisa was saying. So if the town decides we really don't have the money to put on these auxiliary modules to make this water really clean that leaves this. So now the community people are going to be living with something that's going to be taking water that they really don't want in their backyard or under their house or elsewhere. So some of this has to do with the will of you guys in making this decision and how important the quality of the water leaving the plant is to all of us that drink this water eventually. I mean, we're talking about all of the island's water is going to be potentially contaminated by a limited facility, which only takes out nitrates, or we can have maybe better quality water leaving it if we spend the money and put the modules in. So I am encouraging you to go for the Cadillac model rather than the Ford Focus. Thank you.
Yeah, John, I think the town board has committed to, solve this problem however it needs to be done, whether we can find grants, whether we can use WQI money, whether ultimately we have to bond for it. But, we're well aware of the problem. And again, as we said to the school, we don't want to do a quick fix. We want to do a long-term fix.
And the modules get added as needed. That's number one. So if they're not needed right now, they won't get added. So that would have to be delayed. And the other thing that springs to my mind is these contaminants are going into the groundwater with or without the system. So the system is, in my mind, the only shot we have at removing them, the emerging contaminants.
That's
There's
correct.
no other, there's nothing else on the horizon if we do nothing.
Yes, but
And so,
BJ,
I
they're
don't
being
know.
concentrated in one spot. That's a big
Well, they're being
difference.
concentrated in one spot in the center now.
Wait,
just up the
in one
road.
spot, excuse me, you've got several different buildings. You've got the school building, that's one spot, but now you're taking 3,000 to 6,000
stay-
gallons and spreading it all over the place. It's a little bit different.
Do I misunderstand that it doesn't stay in one place, that there's a movement to it?
Well, that's the reason we didn't want to put it. Go ahead, Pio.
Yeah,
Yeah, if I may add some context, the
please.
current disposal locations impact a lot of wells. The current disposal locations, flow paths traverse many developed parcels. The proposed location at Manwaring traverses little to no properties. So all things being equal, the Manwaring site is superior to being in the center of town. We have brought this issue up about the treating for the emerging contaminants right from day one. So, John, we appreciate your support, and I didn't want to get too aggressive, but unless there's a direction otherwise, we consider it to be a component part of the system. And we strive to make this project let me call it a great model for how island communities such as Shelter Island need to deal with their wastewater in an affordable manner that does the job and is not blind to issues that we know as environmental engineers exist throughout the world.
Peter, Peter Grand, the chairman
Yeah,
of the
well,
WEC.
Thank you. Thank you. So the discussion so far that I've heard is that is of thinking about emerging contaminants and thinking about additional treatment components. There was some discussion on the WAC around the potential for discharge of the potential for moving gray water from the plant, using the plant modularly, and then having further downstream discharge area for reuse of gray water in non-human consumption kinds of agricultural applications. Is that something that competes in your mind as an alternative to or add on to additional treatment?
Not at all. Not at all. First of all, just so we all speak the proper terms, gray water should not be used as the effluent is clean water. So it's what we would like to call it is more reclaimed water. Gray water is frankly all wastewater except toilet wastewater. So
okay, so the cleaned water,
right,
can be discharged into the ground at this site.
That's correct.
It could potentially also be diverted to uses even further downstream.
That's correct. Oh, absolutely.
Correct. So we're not necessarily discharging all of the it's true that all of the center's waste travels out from the center. If it's completely untreated water is traveling out from the center. Now we have treated water slightly off of the center being discharged. And the question, John's question, spoke about the thought that there was an element of concentrating waste going on here at the man-wearing location from several different locations not far away. So I'm just, again, thinking about, all of this is about downstream flow or, flowing water's continuously going to move until it hits the bays. And there are very few, but there are in fact the Sylvester Manor pumping location for their facility downstream from where we are now. So further distribution or further movement of water that's now clean water, but not wastewater, but reclaimed water beyond their pumping facilities strikes me as something that ought to be on the table or in consideration. So it strikes me as advantageous. So I'm asking again, just in terms of, obviously we haven't committed to further designs beyond the design that's on the table right now. But if the opportunity comes up to make use of the water, rather than having all of the water concentrated and discharged at one place, that seems to be something that should be considered as, a potential further solution.
Absolutely. No, the one, no, you're absolutely right, is we use the term dispersal, where you spread it out. The one item that we need to be, let me say, cognizant of is that we would prefer to use reuse with the technique below grade, below ground. As well as we don't want to reuse the water for any, let me call it, for any product that is consumed directly by humans. So there's issues associated with rules by how one uses treated wastewater in a beneficial manner. The simplest way is frankly using it for landscape irrigation with drip irrigation. That's the no-brainer, easy to do. Using it for agricultural purposes, one has to be, there's rules, if you will.
Right. And I do see that Sarah, who is from Sylvester Manor, has her hand up. So I would ask to bring her into this conversation.
Sarah, you have the floor.
Peter, thank you. I showed my face. I didn't have my hand up yet, but I did want to speak just generally in support of what Joe and the town board are doing here, and offer the data that we can to PO that would be helpful. We do have at Sylvester Manor, which is directly downgrade of this system. A Long Island well permit for 7 active wells. We have pumpage reports since 2017. Those are both domestic and irrigation wells. So we'll be more than happy to provide the information that we have so we can further reassure ourselves and everyone that the cone of influence for these wells is going to be compatible with this plan. So Pio will be in touch, and Joe can connect us, and we'll get you all that information.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, we're working with Drew Bennett, is our engineer, so we can fold him in and make sure you get all the information that you need.
Great. Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Amber?
I'll go next. Christina, could I have screen share? I wanted to circle back, PO, to BJ's question about the timeline. I've just brought up page 60 of the engineering report from January, and I presume that this will now be updated for the Manwaring Road site?
Absolutely.
So we'll get something similar. And then after that, so that's the engineering report. And then the next step, I guess, is the design of recommended alternative Manwaring Road. So what's needed in order to get that next step started?
The next steps, and Joe and I briefly talked about this. The next step is for us, and like I think I said a while ago, during the next couple of weeks, we want to just complete our due diligence on the Manwaring site, which will include integrating the information that Sarah just spoke about, their wells, et cetera, so that we can dot the I's, cross all the T's, and be able to confidently tell the board that all systems are go. We don't see any barriers, and frankly get an application into the state for a speedies permit. Once we complete that process, the next efforts are really associated with, let me call it, the engineering design. So it then gets into, there's going to be a need to get some survey work done, and then the production of the plans and specifications. So I guess I could better say this by the next milestone is, let me call it, closing the chapter on the selected site and making sure that there's, that's not going to come, that we're all in agreement, and again, all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed. And then after that is really permitting. We already have the documents ready, just getting them into DEC, and then the production of the plans and specifications.
Okay. We had in here grant funding application for July. So was that for the consolidated funding application?
Yes, I was targeting, because that's typically the end of July is typically the deadline. My expectations is that Jennifer she'll have all the materials one way or the other that she'll need for that application. And, whether they're complete or not, they're clearly going to be significantly underway, so that those applications don't really start getting reviewed until September. So by the time the state's reviewing those, supplemental information could be going to them that says, hey, the designs are complete and been permitted, et cetera.
Okay. Right. Yeah, because I have a meeting with her later this week, and so I wanted to circle around on this as well.
Right.
Other
Right.
topics
She
I
should be, again, that July date was selected because that's the deadline typically for the consolidated funding applications.
Yeah,
Right.
I wanted to make sure we weren't off track on that.
Right. Right. No
Okay.
question.
So I have a question, probably for the town attorney. We wrote a request for proposals. We got the proposals in, we accepted Lombardo Associates for the project. So this is the next phase of the project. Once the town board says, okay, go ahead, do we need to do any resolutions or anything, or?
No, if it was, there was a reso.
For the project.
As a project, yeah.
Right.
No.
Okay,
So as long as it was in the scope of
Right.
services.
I'm just trying to get a feel for how do we proceed.
No,
Okay.
again, if there was a reso issue that encompassed, that hired them. And
Right.
encompassed the scope of services that
Okay,
was contemplated at the time. you're fine.
okay, thanks. Penny?
Yeah, thank you. I just have a question about the actual method of the nitric system. I know that it's predominantly liquid wastewater that you're dealing with, but there has to be a certain amount of particulates. And I'm just wondering, does that go through the system and continue into the ground discharge area, or is there a way that it's collected? And I'm curious, what kind of particulates are there and what happens to them?
Sure, no, a good question, Penny. Think of it this way, the project really consists of a septic tank at each of the parcels, and the liquid's getting transported to the treatment site. Now, in that liquid, you're correct that there are particulate matter. It's referred to as total suspended solids. Solids. Now, those total suspended solids, frankly, are very heavily biodegradable. And the effluent quality, it typically comes in around 100 to 120 milligrams per liter or parts per million. And coming out of the treatment system, it's typically below 4. So while there may be some particulate matter in the effluent, you can't see it with the naked eye. And so it'll get filtered in the soil. And again, for discussion purposes, it's all biodegradable. So it's ultimately going to get converted to carbon dioxide.
So when the system collect the stuff that stays in the system, is that collected somewhere, or how do you handle that?
Well, yes, that you're referring to how often does the septic tank get pumped?
Yeah.
And
so basically, you pump it.
That's correct, because solids will accumulate there. In our professional opinion, the pumping is only required perhaps, well, we estimate, our opinion is probably once every 10 years, if that. Because you'll hear that once every 3 years is a standard, but that's a real standard for old systems that are undersized. These systems or current systems have plenty of capacity. They don't need to be pumped out. It's a waste of money. So, so it's not a problem.
And Penny, just keep in mind, that's not at the treatment site. That's at the individual building site that we're speaking. Okay.
And they would get pumped and frankly brought to a wastewater treatment plant off island.
Yes, but so you're saying that the liquid that leaves the building, that this has no particulates in it. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, no. The liquid leaving the building is raw wastewater.
I mean, that's leaving this septic system that you're pumping down to your treatment area.
Right.
That there are still floating particulates or not?
Well, yes, yeah. It's referred to as suspended solids. Yep. But it's not that great, and for practical purposes, it all gets removed in the treatment process because it's all biodegradable.
Okay. I'm just curious how you collect it out of this where this field is, how you get it. I mean, I don't quite understand how you collect it out of there, but.
Out of the field?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it just goes.
No, but there's no solids going into the field of any magnitude, and any solids that do go into the field, frankly, break down.
Yeah, so like 10 years into this system is still fully functioning, and these particles.
Yeah, we estimate that it's what we call useful life is well over 80 years.
And those particles haven't clogged things up?
No. Good question. No, they won't, especially with sands that exist on the island. The sands are very forgiving.
Okay, so they're going out into the sand.
That's correct. Yeah, and again, the solids that are going into the sand is very low concentrations.
Mhm.
If you looked at a glass of it, you couldn't see solids. So, so it's quote being filtered as it goes through the soil, and the quantity of mass that's getting filtered is really very small.
Okay, thank you.
Right, and consider
Julia?
it's food for the bugs that live there.
Hi, just to clarify, the septic tanks themselves will be newly installed and they'll have filters that will prevent solids from leaving and going into the wastewater system. Is that correct?
Well, we've assumed for budgeting that there are all new tanks, because I believe most of them are pretty old. It's designed to minimize the amount of solids going out of the tank, but it doesn't filter the soil, the effluent. You may be referring or thinking about what's called effluent filters. Made Zabel, there's a bunch of companies that make them. Now, those are used for septic systems. We don't need them for this kind of system. And frankly, they were developed and used many years ago for undersized systems. These days, with the redundancy that exists in the systems, do you need them or not is a real debatable question. And we don't think you really need them on your soils because you've got very good sandy soils. If we were to engineer it, it would be in sites that have clay, where you really want to protect the drain field. So it's not a concern here.
There is sand in that.
Thank you.
Okay, Joe, I won't hold you to the numbers. When the county put in place that we can use 20% of the 2% money for water quality, the emphasis was on putting in the IA systems for the nitrates. And you and I had discussed, give us a ballpark of how many nitrate individual systems we're addressing by doing this project.
Back of the napkin calculation for the flow rates we're talking about and the average system that's available, we're looking at about the equivalent of 150 IA systems.
Okay, and that's one of the reasons I just want to bring up that, when we started, we wanted to hold off a little bit on the WQI, just outright awarding grants for every individual system, because there might be potential to better spend the money to address the wastewater, and that's exactly what we're doing right now. But we're still granting grants for individual systems, but we also want to look at using a good portion of that money for this project. Anybody else? Gordon?
Come on.
Yeah, please.
Trying to recall who am I speaking for, but let me just nice. It was a very nice presentation, Bayo. Okay, who I've never really met, but the question I have is, with the space that you're using now, is it the same size as that was prepared for Clenowickus? Were you using exactly the same size property, like a 1 acre piece?
Yes, I mean, nothing's changed in terms of
Okay.
I think you're referring to the footprint of.
Yes, correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. And then the other question that I had a couple of questions, which I still got complicated with. The study was done or funded as a municipal wastewater treatment facility. I notice we don't use that expression any longer. So this is more than just the municipal buildings. This is really including other residential properties?
No. The project is solely for municipal facilities, which are the municipal buildings and the school. So
Okay.
there is no.
There are no residential properties along the route that are connecting to it.
No, and, I'll defer to the town attorney, but, if there were non-municipal facilities connected to this, it would have to be, the project would be required to be established under a district.
I would agree with that.
Be yourself closer to the microphone.
I would agree to that. Pending further research, but my initial reaction is yes, a district would have to be formed.
Okay, and then the only other thing that I know when we looked at the Clinowickis, obviously my questions really have to deal because the old nursery borders the back of this particular property. And as I understood earlier on, the space Clinowickis had some interest because of the fact that there could be expansion because there was more space. So I guess my concern is, again, not to go down the road of Clinowickis. There's, I guess what I'm asking is there any assurances that we won't get into expanding into the old nursery?
The town's going, and we've had this discussion, the town is going to look forward to how we can use CPF properties, what they can be used for and what they can't be used for. So I'm not going to give you an answer, yes or no on that. It depends on.
So we don't really have an answer.
We don't have an answer.
So it's an open item that it possibly.
For all CPF properties, not for that property.
But since we have a treatment facilities there.
That's not why we chose that location, though, Gordon.
I didn't say that.
No, I'm saying, that was really, as Joe said, it was the only available site, quite honestly, that we can get started on.
So, all right, so basically, the Clinowickis, we took off the table, we took that off, but we'll still be considering other CPF properties that for alternate usage.
We had a meeting yesterday with the CPF and the Housing Board, and one of the CPF members said the town board made a huge mistake by going with Clinowickis, and it was good that you changed your mind. We didn't change our mind. We're still going to pursue not that for this project, but again, what our options are with CPF land for the greater good, for the protection of the aquifer, for what we can use it, what we can use those. We're not looking to build on these properties. We're not looking to put sewer plants on them. We're looking to protect the aquifer. And if in fact we can.
I would welcome the opportunity quickly because it really is having an impact, okay, on acquisitions. Okay, so I just leave off that way. As soon as the board is available, I would really like to continue this conversation. Okay.
I think we're going to set up a meeting.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else? Patrick?
Just a simple question connected to affordable housing or community housing. It seems to me there's an opportunity with this being approved, assuming everything goes all right, the DEC approves it. Why wouldn't you seriously consider putting the community housing or a good chunk of it, say 50 units, in different parts of the center? Now, I know you've thought about it because I've chatted with a few of you, but why wouldn't you at the same time be planning that, even though I recognize you got to finish the whole first project, but you know you're going to extend? Why not lay out the plans and the work to do that? And I realize you got to figure out whether it's a bond to get the money, but a good chunk of housing could be there, both for older people, younger people, and for the good of the town. I mean, that is probably the ideal place to have a good chunk of it. Right?
I think, Patrick, certainly that's in the back of everyone's mind. But again, first we have to address the immediate problem.
I understand.
And then, we're not looking at expansion of the system for new units. We're looking right now at expansion for treatment. But
Right.
certainly it's something we bought a parcel on 114 specifically for housing. So
So the engineering firm could look at that in terms of down the road. So in other words, you're not stopping and then not able to do it at a later date.
But we're not, well, yes, exactly. But we're not dictating that, make sure this system can hold
No.
X amount of houses.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Also, if I could just chime in, we have we're going to have those studies commencing, the housing study the TDR study. And so during those studies, it's going to look at different areas of the town that would provide a venue, an appropriate venue for, community housing. So that will be, gone through with a fine tooth comb. So, and again, we're hiring the professionals to determine that. So that will be taken into account.
Anybody else? Okay, so again, the next step is we give the go-ahead to proceed with this parcel?
Well, it's to have the engineer go ahead.
That's what I mean.
Yes.
Have the
Okay.
engineer proceed.
All right.
Again,
Good luck, Pio.
Continue.
No.
yeah.
Well, here's my question, do we wait one more week to see what response we have from this meeting, from the public, or do we? How does the board want to
Well,
handle
it sounds like they've got work to do and.
They still have to do some due diligence, looking
I
at
think
well
it's-
locations
yeah,
and
go
such.
on
So
that. Go
I think
on.
they can continue looking at the due diligence, all the surrounding wells, ground flow, all that. Soil testing, and then we can get back to them again next week after we have input.
What about the money in terms of paying for the study?
Well,
That's already paid
That's already-
for.
Oh, this.
It's part of the
future part is paid
original.
for?
It's part of-
Yay.
it's
part of the
part of the
original.
brand.
I forgot that.
Yeah.
Great.
This kind of phase 2 of it.
Yeah.
If I could just chime in here, it would be ideal for the engineering aspect of this, if we could have a clear direction from the town board to advance our efforts at 16 Manwaring. I would propose that at this juncture, if the town board feels comfortable, they give us sort of a resounding yes, that you like this site. And rather than have it contingent on our first level of due diligence, that we just agree to report back the results of that due diligence and not necessarily seek approval once again to move forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
It
Yeah,
does.
yeah,
It makes
definitely. I
sense.
agree with that.
It does.
Okay,
We all do, Joe,
so you, Pio.
That's great.
and Peter too.
Oh. Yeah, the only item that we need to deal with and is obviously with the school being part of the system. The original budget did not include the school. So, but we'll be back to the board on that issue. Joe and I need to go through all the details there and be back to you on that.
Okay.
All right, we'll talk. Okay, all right. Very good. Thank you very much.
It does help us as we expedite this a little. It does help us get back on track for, as Amber brought up, the funding issues for July 2022.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, time,
That's
good
that's
point.
key.
Time is of the essence. It's, I
Time
just
is of the
realized it's
essence.
April. It's the end of April.
The money is available
Actually, May.
now. So I'd like to be able to jump on that.
Okay, Pio, thanks very much. Joe, thank you.
My pleasure working for you. Yeah.
Just at the school, we're assuming the school is going to be,
They are.
yeah.
Contributing
right.
towards the costs.
We'll discuss, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, next on the agenda is the Goodson application, the wetlands application. This has been going on for quite a while, and we had some back and forth, but we just got noticed that the attorney for for the Goodsons is no longer the attorney for the Goodsons. So, and nobody's here from the Goodsons today, so what do you want to do?
Is that true? Can we just see if there's anybody out there that represents the Goodsons now?
Yeah, I would ask. You never know with all these names.
Anybody?
I don't see.
I don't.
Please raise your hand if you represent the Goodsons.
See anybody.
Again, given the fact that at 8:59 in the morning, the attorney that was representing the Goodsons has pulled out and no longer represents them and will not appear at today's work session nor the town board meeting this Friday. It's my recommendation for due process is to not proceed and table it until we get communication from Goodson, whether he indeed wants to proceed and or if he's represented by counsel. I don't feel that it's right to proceed on any discussions regarding this matter if Mr. Goodson is not here. So.
I think that's fair.
I think it's
Yeah, I
fair
agree.
also.
Okay.
Right.
That's all we have on the agenda.
Yeah.
Why don't we start on the other side?
Just on the other side, BJ?
Say again? Oh, I'm uniquely not prepared. Go ahead, Meg.
A comprehensive plan met last night, and we discussed the transportation chapter and history and culture. So if you have any ideas of things we need to look out for in the future, action items that you'd like to propose, please email us so we can consider them and brainstorm them.
Wrapped up.
The documents are available online to look at. We're working on a timeline. We don't have it established yet. We're also waiting to see the timeline for the RFPs that we put out. So once we have consultants signed up for that, then we'll be able to kind of formulate our timeline based around what they're going to be doing as well, so that we can work together and share our information and our resources.
And I want to say
So-
it's a timeline that's going to be
But
written in
it's
pencil.
it's absolutely, it's flexible. It's a guideline, but
because
it's
some-
not going to be set in stone.
Some meetings will draw more public comment.
Yeah.
And so what you thought you were going to get done, you're not going to get done that meeting. So I really think that this whole idea of a timeline is just very much
Well, and I think we're going to have, multiple meetings for
Yeah.
certain things. So it's
Yeah.
going to be a flexible.
has to be.
And that's where I
really.
left off.
Yeah.
I think that was the last meeting.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
That's-
Maybe later.
That's the only one
Amber?
meeting I had.
I got nothing.
Okay. Jim?
Yep, the PEP local government got a thing back from them yesterday. We'll be meeting either on May 25th, June 1st, or June 8th. We're still getting a date. It's a 2-hour meeting. It will involve the feds, the state, county, CPF, town representatives, town departments, and the members of the local governance committee. I'm going to give a brief introduction. We're going to designate 20-minute sessions for the PEP director on funding opportunities here for East End towns. There'll be a 20-minute presentation by the federal government, 20-minute presentation by the state government, 20-minute presentation or a half-hour presentation actually by the county, and a half-hour presentation by the East End Town Funding Group. So that will be, I'll let you know the exact date, and I'll invite Jennifer to make sure that she's, in with us. Second item is on the North Silver Beach property that we are, we're preparing to cut the lawn and tend to the property. We do it annually. There's been an outcry about box turtles and trying to protect box turtles before we bring in heavy equipment to cut that. So I am coordinating with the Silver Beach Association and with Brian Sherman's office. We'll go in there with dogs. It's going to get a fair amount of press. It's something new. Dogs are trained to come and sniff out box turtles. They'll be staked. The turtles will be removed. Hopefully Brian Sherman and his crew will be in on Monday, May 9th, 2 days later, and we'll cut it, brush hog it, and then we'll put the turtles back exactly in the same spot that we had before. So it is an attempt. And if it works real well, Gordon, it's something that we might want to consider. I know it came up with the O'Connor property, so if it works and it looks like it's successful, we'll expand it to other CPF properties as well when we go to clear them.
I like
All right. One of the benefits of, we're one of 12 projects going on in the Peconic Estuary. This is the proposed, it's no longer proposed, the tidal warning gauge at the Shelter Island Sound South Ferry, Shelter Island, New York. The United States Geological Survey, in cooperation with the Peconic Estuary Program and the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, better known as the DEC, proposed a program to expand the existing USGS network of flood-resistant tide gauges and continuous water quality monitoring in the southeast New York State. This program would entail the installation, operation, and maintenance of a new flood-resistant tidal warning gauge with an optional add-on water quality monitor and/or acoustic velocity meter in a vulnerable area of the central Peconic Estuary in Suffolk County. And this is being located, right at the South Ferry. It's got a diagram. I'll share it with the board. The proposed location of the tidal warning gauge itself is depicted in yellow. And then the sensor is right down at the end of the dock, down there in red, in a red triangle. But I'll share this information with you and with the press that you want it's hopefully going to be put in this summer. So they're anxious. That was one of the projects they wanted to work on. I had a meeting, as I do every 2 weeks, with the Shelter Island Health and Wellness Group, with our social worker, Lucille, with Nancy Green, with Lori from the Senior Center, and myself. We're having a senior day, which I announced last week. We'll give you the particulars on that coming up. One of the big problems we're having here on Shelter Island was with aging community, with dementia patients. We're running into a critical caregiver problem here. A lot of seasonal people come out. It puts a tremendous pressure on the family and spouse. They obviously come east to recreate and to be able to come out and enjoy the East End. And either the husband or the wife, who could be well up in their 60s, 70s, 80s and beyond, have dementia issues and other health issues. We recognize this problem. We're hopefully going to start advertising for high school and college students that want to learn a little bit about home care and helping the caregiver, just to give the caregivers a little time off, because the caregivers, it could be it's a very tough thing for them. We also are in need of housekeeping, and I'll expand upon that, in cleaning. There's a tremendous amount of people that are looking for people to help out, paid positions. Obviously, this is not for volunteerism. And
Jim, are you saying that there's a workforce shortage
yeah, there's
in these two areas?
in these two
Okay.
areas, yes. So
All right.
we're going to try to, look to high school and college students to help,
Yeah.
just oversee with elderly people, give the caregiver maybe an hour off,
Right.
rotate that person around the, the several homes,
Mhm.
and also for cleaners to come in and help clean up the homes. We're also in need, if anybody has a juicer, there's a client that we have here. I will go to the Lions Club and ask for somebody to donate some money for a juicer. It's for a person with a lot of medical issues that needs that in the coming weeks ahead. I do want to remind that, we would love to, remember last year I worked on that near-term actions for water thing, and one of the things on letter D was to quantify the water restriction regulations on drought restrictions. The WAC, excuse me, had adopted, but we never really formally adopted it here in the town board. We really need to kind of do that, and we should do that. Let's not wait for the drought in order to conserve water. We should have all of this stuff formally in place and made part of the town code. So just reminded on that.
Jim, can you send me that? And like the whole chart from the WAC when you guys went over all the
Okay.
action items?
Yeah, I will do that.
Thank you.
We'll bring Bo Payne in to give a greater breakdown of this, but we did get the preliminary aerial infrared deer count report. It's not good necessarily. In 2022, we did this the flight was on March the 10th, 2022. It included Ram Island, Little Ram Island as well. It's an IR. Imaging conditions were great that night. We counted 640 deer. That's up from last year's 635. It's only up 5 deer, but again, our goal was to
Trend.
get down to 50% of the deer population by this summer. So if you take a look at we started with a number somewhere around 1,400, you say, well, 640 is under that number. We haven't taken into consideration May, June, and July, when we will have hundreds of new fawns born, and that number will factor in. So even if we end up with,
It just hit me. But that number factored in last year.
it did, Jerry, but the goal was not to be at 635. The goal was to get down to the low 500s to the high 400s, so that when you factor in 1.75 fawns per doe, and remember, of these 640 deer, some of them are guys and some of them are girls and some of them are first-year fawns, so that are not quite ready to reproduce. So they figure about a third of those deer. So if you take a third of 640, that's, that's 200, 213 deer. And you multiply 1.75 times that, it factors into
We're getting up to
300 plus.
1,000 again.
You back up into the 900s at least and nearing in on 1,000. So have we made a dent in the deer population? The answer is yes. But I talked to the supervisor this morning about this. We're going to have to think about more effective ways of getting.
Well, I was going to ask you what happened. Like, did the cull disappoint this year?
Very simple answer,
Yeah.
DJ, is it's harder to get a deer now.
Yes.
So people.
Because they're
that would go-
smarter? I mean, I
No,
don't know.
because there's less of them.
Oh, okay.
So, it used to be you can go out and get a deer and go home and have lunch.
Right.
Now
right.
it's, it's spending a day in the woods and we didn't get the commitment that we had gotten in the past from people to help.
All
So I
right.
think one of the things we're gonna have to look at is maybe expanding that program
Right.
that we're paying people to.
Oh, expand that program. What about a longer season? Is that
What-
possible or is
well,
that against all kinds of laws?
I think rather than us discuss this,
Okay.
let the Deer and Tick Committee, who's got this
Oh,
information
right.
now, let them digest it. Bo is, I'm sure, working on these very answers right now, along with Jim Bevilacqua. And I'm sure they'll come back with the town board with some recommendations on how we can get that done. I will tell you, there are some severe limitations on big properties that we've lost that we're not allowed to hunt. So the picture I circulated over the weekend was, 8 deer standing on Janet Carlson's driveway across the street from my house.
Shoulder to shoulder.
Shoulder to shoulder, in the military would say that's a cluster, you can finish that line, but you should never be that close. There were 8, deer right there staring at the camera, posing for me. And, but there are some areas that we have to hit a little bit harder. I think one of the good things about the infrared is not only do you get a deer count, you get where their concentration, their numbers are.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit more extensive than for us to sit here and try to figure this out. I put it in the hands of the expert like Bo. He'll sit down with Jim and with the committee. They'll come up with some good ideas on how we can do this. But we knew we were going to get to, you have an aging population of hunters. You have, as Jerry said, a little bit more difficulty going out and getting a deer. You have more restrictions being placed on you by big
Increased
parcels.
residences.
Yes,
and
and
just- yeah.
yes, and things of that nature. And you've lost the 4-poster program, which obviously it entered into. We're not just about deer management, we're about really tick management
Mm.
through deer management. So it'll be interesting to see, those numbers as well, because he's collecting data, 8 or 10 important facts. One of them will be on working with the Shelter Island Medical Center on the number of people come in with tick bites, who work with the pharmacy on the number of people coming in for prescriptions. He'll work with the police chief on the accidents and number of
Yeah, because it
accidents.
isn't just.
So there's a lot of data that's out there that's being collected. So I put it in their hands and I'm sure they'll come back with something that's, very good. That's it for me.
Okay. Stephen, anything?
No, Mr. Supervisor.
Good. Okay, next week, we have a few applications for special permits. The Historical Society's having their dance.
Yep.
There was 2 or 3. Or the 10K might be coming. They'll be ready for us next week. And there was another, annual one or something. I figure we
The
do them
arts
all-
and crafts.
Arts and crafts.
Yeah, so that's typical, the arts and crafts.
Yeah, so we'll do that all at once.
That's an August
week.
20th date. That's a Saturday.
Yeah.
That's next to last Saturday in August. That's over here at the school.
Mhm.
Okay. And that's all I have. Anybody, any questions, comments? Bob?
I noticed on the town agenda for this meeting, for the work session, that you have an executive session that's going to cover an interview and legal advice. And I know you'll have a motion in order to have the executive session, but the public is entitled to know what position is being interviewed.
The assessor.
Okay. And the public's entitled to know what subject the legal advice will be on.
Yeah, that will be given when they make the motion.
Will it be given?
Yeah.
Why can't you put it on the agenda? Because it kind of forces people to come down here to actually sit through and wait for the motion to be heard.
I don't think it's an obligation to do it,
But the town,
we'll take it under advisement.
Yeah, one thing we should make the town aware of is that all of us, everybody here at the table went down to the Pridwin on a field trip, And-
No,
and-
Amber didn't.
Oh, okay, all right. So most all of us did anyhow, including the town attorney and along with the building department and everything. And we walked the entire property and we were, we were looking at the pros and cons of different things that we would recommend that needed to be done. So we spent probably the better part of almost 2 hours down there taking a close look at the property. And we made some recommendations that they need to follow through on.
Well, and the reason was because the original site plan review
Right.
has kind of changed.
Yeah, there's legal advice in connection with the
Right.
third one.
Okay.
Okay, so my point has to do with transparency. I don't know anything about what's going on with the Pridwin at this point, but to serve transparency, the motion and to serve and to comply with the open meetings law, have to be specific. You can't just say it's to discuss litigation. You have to actually say what litigation is concerned.
Facts, Stephen?
I have the cases here for the board and I can happy to email it to you. Also, when you can't just say, just to discuss legal issues or to provide legal advice as part of the motion, you have to actually specify.
I know that very well. You don't have to explain that to me. I know very
Okay, so I think in terms of transparency, it would be helpful if the agenda would reflect what would be said in the executive session, so the public doesn't need to come down here each time to see the motion.
Subject.
The subject
Yeah,
of
subject,
the,
yeah, gotcha.
subject of the legal advice or subject.
Certain subjects we can't be that specific about because, there's.
Oh, no, you just need to, but
personnel.
it needs to be one of the 8 subjects.
No, listen, I'm a big proponent.
Okay, well, I've seen agendas.
Suggestion that you make, that maybe we should make the agenda.
Yeah, because if you know the day before the meeting to put legal advice on the agenda and you know what it's going to be about,
Sometimes.
then,
Sometimes.
well, sometimes you don't, but when you do, I think you should do it for transparency purposes. I know
I
Jerry's
really
silly.
don't understand. You want it for transparency. You're not going to be at the meeting. So why can't we say when we're going into executive session what it's for?
Because I have to know whether I should be at the meeting.
You're not going to
And
be
if
at the
it-
meeting. It's executive session.
Well, I could be at the meeting. Maybe there's something discussed, something discussed during the meeting,
Then it would be on the agenda.
If it's open. meeting.
but I don't know whether that's going to be discussed at the executive session.
I think.
All right.
Okay.
I think.
All right, well, thank you for
No,
taking
no,
that
but-
into consideration.
No, absolutely. And,
Okay.
and we will try to be more,
Well, you should comply with the open meeting law.
well, let's take it easy, not comply. We are, every time since I've been here, we make a motion to go into executive, we give the category what we're going into. Certain categories can be more specific, others you don't have to be, given confidentiality. So I get your point. I'm fully aware of all the case law. I'm fully aware of the statutory obligations, and we take it into
Okay.
account as far as the agenda, yeah.
But the
I'll
category,
look into that.
I don't know what you meant by category, but the category that's listed in the statute is not enough. You got to be more specific than that.
Absolutely. I can
Okay.
teach a course on it. And
All
and
right.
if you want to talk about it offline, we can have a nice
Sure.
conversation.
Okay.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Julia? Pam?
No, thanks, Jerry.
Oh, okay.
Hi Supervisor, hi Board. I just have one question and it's in regard to the dock at the Middle Harbor Town Landing. It was my understanding in the March 1st meeting that the town attorney was authorized to write and serve a letter to the owners of the Ram's Head Inn that that dock was to be removed within 30 days. It was never roped off, and now this weekend it has been reassembled rather than being dismantled, is what I thought was going to be happening. Was the letter ever served to the Ram's Head Inn, or was there a new hardship letter written that they requested time to keep the dock there that we're not aware of? Because I was really expecting it to be gone by now.
Yeah, so I've been speaking with representatives of the Ram's Head Inn. They had a couple of dock applications pending. So we're trying to have a global disposition over there. So we'll see which way it's going. But I have not served that letter nor authored that letter as of yet. I was authorized to. There was no time frame on when to issue it. And in good faith, I was having conversations with, again, representatives of the Rams Head Inn. The town board has spoken and you know their direction. So it's news to me now that you said what's over there?
Yes, dear.
They put the floaters back. The floating docks are back in place.
Oh,
And
the
the
floats are
launches,
back.
and the launches there. Like they're
Okay,
ready for business.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for that information. I will reach out to the representatives.
She did.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thanks,
And,
Pam.
and are there any more
Okay.
amended documents for the upcoming public hearing on the new dock application for the Rams Head Inn?
Not that we've received. No,
No new permits have been issued or anything?
No,
no.
no, Pam.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, anybody else? Julie, you good?
I am, Jerry. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Kylie will make a motion. We go into executive session for,
Yes, and we fleshed out what we're going in. Executive session.
all right. Okay, make the motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
What?
We just